Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and in this mini-series, we're looking at how to add music and sound to our games. In the last video, we got music set up with dynamic music that could change between scenes. We added fading as well as the ability to fade in new special music during boss fights and special encounters. That said, things still feel just a little off with no sound effects. So in this video, we're going to show how to add sound to our game. We'll add sword slashing, magic effects, as well as the ability to create walking sound effects each time the player's foot hits the ground. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. Alright, so first things first, let's head into our audio manager where we have the audio manager set up to play our music. An important note here is just that if you have any music preloaded, it often will override whatever's going on in the audio manager, so I'm just going to make sure that mine is set to none, and I'll also turn off play on awake so it doesn't try to play anything as soon as the game begins. Alright, so at the moment we have an audio source to play our music, and we could just add another one for sound, but I want to do this a little more robustly so that we can have multiple sounds playing at one time. So let's head into our audio manager. Up at the top here, we'll make a serialized private integer called pool size, and this is where we can decide just how many audio sources we want to make available. I'll set mine at 10, but we can always change this in the inspector later. Next, we'll just make a list of audio sources that will actually hold all the sound effects sources in our pool. For that to work, we do need to add that we're using system.collections.generic. Now then, as soon as the game begins, we want our audio manager to initialize those audio sources. So we'll set our SFX pool to be a new list, so that'll create an empty list. And then we're going to use a for loop. Now this loop will be performed as many times as the size of our pool, so in my case that's 10 times. And each time what it's just going to do is, first of all, it's going to add to our SFX pool list of sources. And the thing it's going to add is that it's going to go on this game object and add an audio source component. So in my case, I'm going to end up with 10 audio sources added to my list and also put on my audio manager. If I pop into Unity now, I can actually play the game, and if I open up my Bootstrap scene, click on the audio manager, you'll be able to scroll down and see that there are now in fact 10 audio sources. Alright, that's working. So back in our audio manager, let's create a public void method called play_sfx. And here at this point, we could just take in an audio clip for our clip and a float for our volume, but there's actually a better way to do this. If we head on down to the bottom here, we're going to create a system serializable class. The serializable just means we'll be able to see it in the inspector. We'll call this audio data, and each audio data will hold a audio clip, we'll call it sound clip, as well as a float for volume, and we'll initialize this at 0.5. If we use 1, then there's no way to actually make things louder in the game, so starting at 0.5 gives us that ability to customize louder or quieter. I also just want to set this as a range so that we can't accidentally set it higher than 1 or lower than 0. Now all this does is sort of bundle our information together. So now rather than passing multiple parameters, we can just pass along the audio data. Now every time we try to play a sound effect, we want to find an available audio source to do that playing. So here we'll use a for loop again, and we're just going to loop through our sound effects pool count. So if there's 10 in the pool, we'll loop through all 10. Here, each time we come across one, we're just going to ask ourselves if that SFX pool, the one that matches our current iteration, so starting at 0, then 1, then 2, if it is not playing, that means we found our audio source and we can tell the audio source at this point in the pool that it needs to play one shot. That means it's just going to play and then empty itself out again. And here we'll just pass along our data's sound clip as well as our data's volume. At that point we will have played the sound so we can return as we don't need to go any further. Now at this point we actually need to play some sounds. For this video I'm going to be using Leofaz's RPG Essential Sound Effects. You can get it for free on the Unity Asset Store. Now if you already have your own sounds, you could just drag them right into the Assets folder in Unity like we did with our music. However, if you are using the Unity Asset Store, you'll want to go up to Window and go into our Package Manager. Now inside of here you want to go to My Assets, find the sound effects, and then click Import. You should get a pop-up menu here where you can decide which sounds you want. For my sake, I'm just going to take all of them for now. And after a brief download, it will show up inside your project. To stay organized, I'm going to drag this into my music folder and then actually rename that as sound. Inside of the folder, I'll make a separate music folder and just put all my music there. So now my sound and my music are separate. At this point, we can click our way into the folder, and you can actually just sample any of these by hitting the play button over here in the inspector. All that's left to do now before we test is actually call these sounds to be played from within our scripts. For my sake, I'm going to go into my bootstrap scene, click on my player, go to my sprite, and I'm just going to open up the combat sprite so we can get some attack sound effects. Now inside of here, I'll just begin by making a header for sound, and we'll make a couple of public audio datas. I'll do one for the attack sound when we actually swing the weapon, and another for the actual hit sound, which will only be played if we actually have a target that gets hit. We can then come down to our attack, and here, after our return statement, we have the fact that the player is able to attack. So we'll go to our service locator, get the audio manager, and tell it to play the sound effects for our attack data. I'll just copy that, come below where we check with our overlap circle to see if we've hit an enemy and actually found one, and if so, we want to play our hit sound. Now at this point, we're just going to optimize a little. Instead of constantly talking to our service locator, as our player is going to be doing a lot of attacking, let's cache a reference to it. So up at the top, we'll make a private audio manager called audio manager. Then we can come down to our start method, and here, since there's just one line, I'll use a lambda expression to keep this nice and tight. We'll just make sure that our audio manager is equal to service-locator.get audio manager. Now that we've cached it, we can come down below and replace these longer calls through the service locator with just audio manager. Now then, back in Unity, if we go to our combat script, we can now open up the audio data and add the different effects we want. These ones happen to be fairly quiet, so I'm going to keep my slash at a 0.5. And for the flesh impact, I'll put it at a 0.6, as I want that one to be just a little bit louder. All right, let's give this a try. Okay, so when I get in the game and take an attack, you'll notice that it's actually almost impossible to hear. My slashes are super quiet, and when I hit the enemy, you can in fact make it out, but it's hard to hear. So let's fix our music, which is currently still blasting at a full volume. If you take a look here at our room service, you'll notice that it's still just using a clip for music. So let's update it to use this audio data that we've added. So instead of a clip, we're going to pass along a full data here. Now we don't have to do anything else here, but we will have to go to our receiver in the audio manager and make sure that our play music is updated in the same way our play SFX is. So now instead of needing a separate clip and volume, we can just pass along the audio data. Down below then, we just want to make sure that we're using the data.soundclip as well as the data.volume. Let's do the same thing for our music trigger, making sure that it uses audio data. That way our boss encounters and special music will also have this high level of control where we can set the volume as well as the clip. Now then, we can click on our room service. We will have to add our sound back in, but now we can take our music, and I'm going to turn mine way down to something like 0.2. This allows us to control our volume a lot more inside of Unity without having to actually change the clips themselves. All right, now when we get in the game, that sounds much better. We can hear it quite clearly, and it blends nicely with the music. Now just to give another example of how to do this, let's give our enemy some sound. We'll head into our enemy combat. Now to speed this up, I'll just go into combat and copy the sound headings as well as our audio manager hookup. We'll paste those into enemy combat, and then down in the start method, we'll make sure to get our audio manager by asking the service locator for it. And then things are similar to our player. Down in our perform melee attack, we can tell our audio manager that it should play the sound effects for our attack sound. And then we can come down below where we've already found out that we have in fact hit something that has health, and we can play our hit sound inside of there. Back in Unity, we'll set these up by going into our enemy combat and making sure that it also has a sound. I'm going to use the bite for the hit sound, keep it at about 0.5. Then I'm also going to use the impact flesh here, and again, turn it up to about 0.6. This is not a bad time to run a test. That said, for the interest of time, I know it works, so I'm going to just kind of move on. Next, we're going to show how to add some sound for our magic. So I'm going to open up my spark effects, which is just a random shape here that when it animates, it plays some lightning bolts. This one's a little tricky because it doesn't actually have any scripts attached with it. So let's actually create a single sound proxy, which we can put on different objects that we just want to play one sound. And then we can reuse this in a whole bunch of cases. Now this is going to be a super simple script that will give us the ability to call sound effects from any animation we want. Let's begin by getting rid of our start and update methods. And then we'll make a serialized private field that will just be a reference to audio data. We'll call this one sound. At this point then, the only thing we need to do is have a public void play sound method. which will just look in the service locator and get the audio manager and tell it to play a sound effect. And here we'll just pass along our audio data. In Unity then, we can go back to our special effect here, add that single sound proxy, make sure that we have actually added audio data. So let's give it a sound effect. I'm going to use thunder and then choose a volume. I'll leave this one at 0.5. We can then head down to our animation pane and pick any point along the animation where we'd like the sound to start. I want mine to actually happen right away. I'll add an audio event here. And now we can see that single sound proxy, go to methods and just say play sound. That's all there is to it. With this, we can go ahead and give our game a test. Right now when I get in here, my enemy is in fact making sounds. My sounds also work, and if I collect a spell and then get myself over here to safety, I can select that spell. Oh, let's get closer. And when I cast it, excellent, we're getting our thunder sound effect. All right, this is looking pretty good. The last thing I want to show you in this video is just how to create some sound effects for our movement so that our player has footsteps and also a sound effect for landing and sliding and that sort of thing. This is actually going to be done very similar to our single sound proxy. I'm just going to make a more general one called sound proxy though, so that we can do a bunch of sounds in one place. As usual, we'll get rid of our start and update methods, and then we'll just declare a bunch of serialized fields so that we can have all the audio data we need. I'll make one for a walk sound, one for sliding, and then another for when we land after jumping. Now, just like in our other cases, we'll get a cache for our audio manager, and in our start method, we'll go ahead and ask the service locator to get that audio manager for us. From here, we'll just create a bunch of one-line methods. So we'll have a public void player walk sound, which is just going to tell our audio manager to play the sound effects for our walk sound. I'll then copy that, paste it a couple of times, and do the same thing for our slide sound, making sure to change it to use our slide data. And finally, one for our land sound, again, making sure that we change the audio data that we're passing along. All right, our animator will now be able to see these, so let's pop back into Unity. Here, let's go to our player, find a sprite, and the important thing here is that we make sure this is the same object that holds the animator. Let's add our sound proxy in, and then go ahead and grab some sounds. I'm going to use step rock, and I'm going to turn it right up as these are really quiet sound effects. I don't have a great slide effect, so I'm just going to use miss evade here, which isn't perfect, but it'll work. And finally, I'll grab a landing sound and crank that one up as well. Now then we can go to our animation pane, and let's begin by going to our run animation. Here we can find the exact part in the frame where our foot touches the ground. We'll add an animation event and then tell our sound proxy that it should play the walk sound. I'm then just going to copy that, find the spot where my other foot hits the ground, there we go, and we'll paste that in. And now we'll get a sound each time our player's footfall hits the ground. I'll do the same thing for land. I want it to play right away, so we'll just add that audio event, make sure that we play the land sound. Next up, we'll go to our walk animation. Find our footfalls, and then like we did with run, just add in that event, go to our sound proxy, and make sure that we play the walk sound on both that one and the one when the other foot hits the ground as well. We can paste that in there. Finally, let's go to our slide animation, and I'll play one right as soon as we start to slide, telling our sound proxy that it should play the slide sound. And this one's a really short sound, so I'm actually just going to go to the point where my player kind of bobs a little here, and then I'll play the sound one more time. This one won't be perfect. Hopefully you can find a better slide sound. At this point we can remove the bootstrap scene, and then I just want to make sure that my other rooms are set up so I can do a full test. I'll go to room 2, make sure that its room service is set up with the new audio data. I'll give it a song, make sure that its volume is turned down quite low. And then we want to do the same thing with our music trigger. In my case, I put it on the enemy himself, so I'll head in there. And we'll give him some audio data, making sure he has his song and that we pick an appropriate volume. With that done, we're ready to give this a test. Right when I get in the game, it seems that all of my effects are working nicely, including my slide and walk effect. I can grab some magic spells here. Try to get some distance from this enemy who is making lots of sound. And there we go, that's also working. When I go to the next room, nice little fade out, our music changes, and then another fade when we head to the enemy. All right, that is sounding so much better. Wish you luck as you add sound into your own project. This actually wraps up our sound and music series. In our next and final series of the Metroidvania, we're going to be adding some save data. Hope to see you in that series. Until then, though, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.